Great. So just a reminder to everybody, I think we're starting the live stream shortly. So, well, actually we've turned to speaker view, so you probably won't necessarily be seen. But if you wanted to turn your video off or anything, obviously feel free. But yeah, we'll be starting shortly. Oh, yes, Sangadara is saying we're now live on YouTube. How exciting. People are still arriving. It's good. The calm before the storm. That's great. It's also just a reminder to people, if you're arriving, you might want to just turn your view to speaker view, as we'll be starting shortly. So you probably want to see our team who are lined up ready to go in the Taraloka Shrine Room.
And if you don't have us on speaker view, we'll all be very, very small because there's 4 of us fitting on the screen instead of 1.
Yes, exactly. And of course, the
You're
Buddha.
about this big at the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, maybe let's just make a start, seeing it's 7:30. I'm sure more people will arrive. Yeah, but just firstly, a big welcome to you all. A big welcome back if you've been joining in from previous times. Really great to have you here for this live Q&A for Alive, Aware, Awake. And again, if you haven't been tuning in and you're not aware, we have a load of really great retreat resources available on thebuddhacenter.com/awake. So do check them out. So my name is Hridayagita, and myself and Maitridevi, who you might just see in a few minutes, we're both hosting this session. But of course, the main feature this evening is the team at Taraloka. So Maitridevi will be introducing them shortly. So I just wanted to say a few kind of housekeeping things before we start. And largely this is just to do with the questions, asking questions. So at the beginning, we're just going to have a bit of a warm up, if you like, and we'll just stay muted for that part. But we will have an option for you to speak and to ask your questions. So what I'm going to suggest is how we'll do this is by raising your hand. So this is a kind of a technical Zoom thing. So if you go down to the bottom menu bar, you'll see a button called Participants. If you select that, it'll open up a side panel. And then on that side panel, you'll see a button for raising your hand. So the good thing about raising your hand in Zoom is that it keeps track of which order people have raised their hand. So that will just help us to be able to kind of work our way through the list in a nice orderly fashion. So you can raise your hand when you have a question at any point. Oh, and someone's just saying the top right on an iPad. So thank you, Eileen. If you're on an iPad, you can find that button on the top right. Yeah, so you can ask a question, or if you feel shy and you'd rather not speak, well then at that, you can also put a message in the chat box. So at a certain point, I'll invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Yes, I'll invite you by name to unmute yourself or ask your question. Otherwise, Maitridevi will keep an eye in the chat box and she'll ask the question on your behalf. Yeah. So just one last thing is, in terms of asking your questions, just try and keep them concise if you can, because it just helps us, well, it helps the team to understand if it's a question is concise, and also make sure we can have as many questions as people would like to have, answered. Yeah, so ready to go at that point. So I'm going to hand over to Maitridevi now, who's, going to take us away, take us into this conversation.
Great, thanks, Hridayagita. So yeah, really lovely to see you all, the Taraloka team, especially in the shrine room there. It's very lovely to get a sense of, just the space that you're in. And I just thought it'd be nice, as a way of you saying hello, if you could just introduce yourselves and let us know what your names mean. So I'll just let you do that one by one.
I've got to go first because I'm being looked at. So my name is Maitridevi. Maitri, it's a Sanskrit name, and Maitri is the same as metta. So it's loving kindness. And Devi is a goddess or a queen or a bird or an angel. So something like that, like a queen or a goddess of love on a good day. Yeah. It's always on a good day, isn't it?
Yeah.
So my name is Maitrisiddhi. So you will spot the Maitri is the same. So it's loving kindness or love or friendliness. And the Siddhi means success or attainment or achievement. So it means success based in love.
Lovely.
So hi everyone, my name's Maitrimatty, so another Maitri. And Mati could be translated as something like mind. So the meaning of my name as it was given to me is she whose mind turns to loving kindness, to Maitri.
And my name is Hridayagita, where Hridaya means heart or essence. And it's the same word that's the Sanskrit word that's used in the Heart Sutra. So it's the heart or essence of the teaching. And Gita is song. So my name means song of the heart.
Lovely. Oh, thank you. Really lovely to hear it. So lots of metta there. 3 Maitris and a heart. That's beautiful.
There's something slightly ironic, really, isn't it? But maybe this retreat should be on metta. Oh, well, no, it's not, is it? It's mindfulness.
Yeah, lovely. So yeah, Alive, Aware, Awake, the retreat on mindfulness. And obviously for the last couple of days, you've been sort of delivering the workshops. So what I would love to hear is, as a way of us just getting back into that zone again of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, I'd love to hear from each of you, which is your, if we could say, like, what's your favorite foundation? So which one is the one that you sort of respond to the most out of those 4 foundations? And just a little bit about why that is the particular one that you respond to. That'd be great.
Well, I could start again. So, I mean, I've got 2, but that's obviously cheating. So I want to just put the body in there because, that feels really crucial. The body is a starting place. But I think chitta, which we haven't come on to, because that's the heart mind. And I think, so for me, that's where the heart comes in. And it's also where story comes in. So we're going to have something about story tomorrow night, but that's an area I find really interesting, what our stories are and how much they affect us. So yeah, probably for me, it's chitta.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, I had a view for many years that I couldn't do mindfulness. You know, other people were mindfulness practitioners, but I wasn't. And part of the reason that I had that story about myself was, I was just identifying mindfulness solely with the body. And for me, the body isn't a very accessible way in. It's like it can come online later, but actually, I don't find it my primary way of becoming aware. So again, I've got 2 favorites. They're the opposites, Maitridevi's. So probably like my top favorite would be Vedana. So if you've listened to today's talk, would have been on Vedana. So a lot of the time it's like, I'm just noticing, is my experience pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And what different bits of it? Because quite often it's like, there can be something that's quite unpleasant and something else that's quite pleasant at the same time. And then I can sort of ask myself, okay, well, where is it pleasant or unpleasant? And then from that, it can sort of like lead me into the body. But for some reason, if I try to go straight to the body, it just doesn't work. I'll leave my second one because I think that would be cheating.
Okay. So this might just be a favourite for today or tonight rather than a forever favourite. But I think the body is my favourite for tonight. And I think it's, I can be quite analytical. And so sometimes with other areas of practice, awareness can take me into, awareness can be a bit too overly vigilant at times. It can be a bit too analytical. It can actually encourage my tendencies towards anxiety in some way. And I think if I really want to feel more openness and spaciousness in my experience, I think it's often coming into the body, I can find particularly more softness in my experience more immediately than through other ways.
Yeah, lovely.
Well, it might have been obvious from last night, but the body is really, really important part of my practice. But I think it has to work alongside the other foundations, but particularly dharmas. For me, it's kind of like the meaning of being in the body and being mindful of body, vedana, chitta, is because of applying dharma with that and reflecting on dharma and seeing the freeing nature of mindfulness. So I think of the four of us, probably we've got three not totally metta practitioners, but prefer metta if we're going to generalize. And mindfulness has really been my way in, but it's mindfulness with meaning. It's not just, for me, it has to be in the context of the Buddha's teachings. Otherwise I just get a bit stuck with, yes, so what? I'm in my body, so what vedana, so what chitta, now what? But with bringing in the dharma as well, it's really, really important.
Yeah, great. Really lovely to hear the range in a way, like already just you touching on that whole range of how much those foundations can cover. Yeah, great. So I wonder, so Maitrisiddhi, in your introductory talk, I think on the first day, you mentioned that you think mindfulness is an adventure.
Yes.
So I wonder if perhaps you could just say a little bit about, and I think you also mentioned that your initial impression of mindfulness was as boring. And I'm just wondering if you could just say as a way in, like, how did that change? How did it change from thinking of mindfulness as boring to thinking of mindfulness as being an adventure? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been quite a journey. So actually, I don't know if I should say this anyway. Never mind, I'm going to say it anyway. Like I remember when I first started going along to the Buddhist Center, basically I was so unmindful that I'd quite regularly try to cycle my bike away without having first unchained it from the railings. And this wasn't just like once, this would be like sort of recurrent. And, getting out the door and trying to work out where my wallet and keys were, it was always a nightmare. So what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm probably coming from quite a low level in terms of being able to be present to my experience. And I think to start off with, I came along to the Buddhist Center and metta immediately spoke to me. It's like I always knew why I was doing the metta bhavana, even when I was finding it really difficult. Whereas, the mindfulness of breathing, it's like they say every breath's different, doesn't feel different to me. So I think to start off with, I did really struggle with, I think I just didn't understand why mindfulness was important. But then as I practiced more, I suppose I started to realize that actually you can't practice metta either unless you're able to be present, whether that's in meditation or whether, can I be present to another person? Can I be present to what's going on for myself so that then I'm better able to be in relation to another person? so then I had a much more direct sense of like why it is that mindfulness, I mean, I probably still prefer the term awareness, actually. There's something about mindfulness where it's like I've gone to sleep before I've got to the end of the word. And I think the thing about adventure, it was something about realizing that I could live life from a deeper level if I paid attention to my actual experience. Instead of I started realizing that I was living my life kind of like leaping over what was happening to me for about like 98% of my life in order to get to this really, really intense kind of like 2% where, and this was rock climbing, so everything gets very, very intense, very, very vivid. If you think you're about to die, like, boy, do you focus. And then slowly with awareness practice, I realized, oh, it's that flavor of vividness and adventure and like not thinking that I know what my experience is. Actually, I don't. And when I do get in touch with it, it is as exciting as when I was climbing some 6,000 meter peak in the Andes. And that's why I quit climbing. And that's why I'm now at Taraloka. So that's, you know, that's the sense in which I feel that mindfulness is an adventure.
Yeah, great. So yeah, if any of you do want to ask questions, obviously do chip in. So I think just a reminder, Siddhi, he mentioned about the raise hand button that you can use at the bottom, or just pop that in the chat box. So yeah, I think I've got a question for you, Hridayagita, around the body. So I think you mentioned this phrase of that the body can be a box of, did you say like a box of treasures or a box of pleasure, or I can't remember what you said.
Box of delights.
Box of delights. Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah. So my question was, and yeah, you may have unpacked this yesterday, but particularly for people who are perhaps here today and didn't hear this, but what if the body isn't a box of delights? So what if those people, for those of us that might find the body difficult to be with, how might we approach that?
So I think that's true. I think that's true of almost everyone, that there's going to be unpleasant vedana, unpleasant sensations in the body. It's not about, when I say a box of delights, it's not about becoming present to the body means that everything's going to become pleasurable. However, when we can stay with unpleasant vedana and not bring in what's known as the second arrow of kind of like, I wish it wasn't like this, actually that can lessen something. So it doesn't necessarily lessen the pain. And of course, there are times when painkillers or medication are the only way to alleviate that level of suffering. However, it's the second level of suffering we're talking about, where we don't want to feel it, so we're trying to push it away, and that creates tension, more tension, stress, and really unpleasant sensations in the body. So I think similar to what Maitrisiddhi was just saying about mindfulness being an adventure, I think if we can turn towards our present experience with that mind of adventure, you know, climbing to the top of a mountain isn't necessarily pleasant vedana all the time. Is, you know, you are just on the verge of death, but it's not, not all the time. There's something about well, this body, I think last night I was saying this body is a treasure for us, and it's the only one we've got, and we need to cherish it. And explore it and open it and release it, and it is the vehicle for enlightenment in this lifetime. So whatever conditions we've got, physically, emotionally, mentally, this is what we've got to work with. And it's kind of like, yeah, maybe it's a bit flippant saying it's a box of delights, because there's going to be everything, but in my talk on the body, I'm sort of comparing it to us being anxious about opening Pandora's box and therefore keeping it shut.
Yeah.
So
not going into the body because we're too worried about feeling the pain, whether that's emotional pain, physical pain, spiritual pain, whatever that is. That's more painful than feeling the pain on the whole. Yeah. And it might be, so I have a tendency to dissociation, actually. So actually for me, sometimes coming into the body, I do feel more pain than in the majority of the time if I'm kind of just completely withdrawn and distant. But it's aliveness. So there's still a sense of utter delight of being alive with the present moment and this present physical body as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And maybe I'll just come here in and say that Anne from London has a question. So she's raised her hand. So Anne, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can ask your question now.
Thank you. So this is a question for Maitrisiddhi. So I have asked for ordination and I'm deeply committed to going for refuge. And like you, I think it's completely radical that we can have these deep experiences with very, very, with just, from just paying attention to our direct experience. But also, I think I do have a tendency of finding intense experiences quite enchanting. Strong experiences, you know, even kind of fetishizing the worldly life to an extent, or romanticizing it, the ups and downs. So I guess my question is, going forward with my practice, as I deepen, do I have to give up my equivalent of climbing a mountain? Or can I continue to climb the mountain, but not identify with it, or not, or, you know, hold it lightly? And yeah, I guess that's my question.
Oh, well, of course, what I want to do now is I have a whole more conversation where I want to know what your mountain is, but probably that's not a good idea while we're on live.
Well, I just mean things like traveling, you know, the exoticism of life. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, no, that is helpful to get a sense.
Yeah.
Well, what do I think about that? I mean, I think what it, I mean, if it's like you're sort of feeling at this moment, it's got to be an either or, like either it's going to be traveling and the exotic and the excitement and faraway places, or else it's going to be a very sort of like hardline Dharma life and you're never ever going to go traveling ever again. Like that would seem a pity to have things quite as black and white as that. And actually, in a way, you might find that when you do the traveling, actually, do you see what I mean? If you're more able to be present to the ordinary experiences, like when you're waiting for the ferry or you're waiting for the bus, then that might, you know, you might actually enjoy the traveling you do even more than you currently do. But also, I think as practice deepens, it's like there is, I don't know, I can only speak from my own experience, okay? So it's like, you know, we might have to see what the others say, but I feel like there can be a level of intensity that comes just in your everyday life. So, you know, maybe you're not taking a bus in Kathmandu, but you're taking a bus in London. And it's like, wow, that person just got on the bus and they're carrying a Sainsbury's carrier bag. And it's like, actually, it can feel as exotic and as exciting. Because, you know, I mean, in a way, like London, wow, how much more exciting and exotic can you get than London? So in a way, like the stops being such a difference between the sort of peak experience and the everyday experience. It's more like they sort of come together. And as you find your everyday experience more and more satisfying, actually it's like you've got less of a need to go off somewhere else to find an experience, which because you're obviously not finding satisfaction in your everyday life, if that's such a strong urge to go somewhere else to find it. So I would imagine over time it's more like that would soften off, but at the same time, you know, maybe you're just always going to really enjoy traveling. You know, that could be just fine.
What if it's not an urge to get away from the ordinary experience, but just something that one can do occasionally?
Well, in a way, what would be the problem with that? I mean, you know, I'm trying not to go off into kind of like, and the ethics of it. But yeah, exactly. You know, why not go traveling? I mean, in a way, it's amazing to go and see different countries, different people, different places. You know, it's great.
I'm curious, do you think you'll ever climb again?
Well, I occasionally do a little bit, but I think what it is like climbing was my whole life. From when I was 14, you know, every holiday was about climbing or mountains. I just kind of like trained, and then all my you know, I just used to work to get money to go climbing. Do you see what I mean? It was like a whole sort of lifestyle, and I climbed to a level that I'd have to have quite a level of commitment of time and energy to climb at that level again. And I probably wouldn't be interested in putting that amount of time and energy into it. But I mean, I definitely, you know, because I've met the Dharma, I met Buddhism in Sheffield, where there's a lot of climbers. And I definitely know other really serious Dharma practitioners who still do go climbing. So it's like it's a personal choice I made. It's not like I think everyone has to make the same choice.
Thank you.
I think I just wanted to add it's like really clear to me. It's something about the intention with which one is carrying out the action. So in both those situations, both with the climbing and, you know, traveling or anything that we're sort of interested and excited by. So again, sort of coming back to the dharmas of it, like travel, like I think Bhante said, it's really important to go to new places, whether that's a new city or go to, you know, somewhere new every year, so that you can unpick that stuck sense of self that we can get into as well. So experiencing oneself in a different culture is really, really invaluable. So if you're going with that intention of kind of like, what is this culture and who do I think I am? And can I sort of pull that apart? That's fantastic. And that's, you know, I think that's really important. And we can get sort of stuck in being who we are in our habitual place where we live with our habitual friends and our habitual everything. And it's kind of like it's a way to get out of that as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I've had a question from Mary Ellen. So this is just rewinding a little bit. So we're speaking about these 4 foundations of mindfulness. And she says she's curious about the word foundations. And could any of you say more about how they function as foundations?
I think risk we're alive, aren't we? So I think foundation's not a particularly good translation. I was just talking to someone earlier and they were saying establishment, and I was saying establishment's not much good either. That sounds like a pub. I also said that we've been using the word gateway, and I think maybe a sort of like a gateway into a mode of becoming mindful might be a good way of thinking about it. I particularly like gateways, so that might be. I don't know whether that is a more helpful. It's a bit of an image, isn't it? I don't know whether that's a more helpful image. I think in terms of a gateway.
I love the word gateway. That's great.
yeah. And then you can just choose. You know, you've got these different options, and they're all leading you into the same sort of space of mindfulness, but they're just coming in from different directions.
It just seems curious that they picked these 4 as opposed to metta or many, many other things that could have been of the 4. Just again, just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because metta isn't mentioned. So these four let's call them gateways, are in the Satipatthana Sutta, and there isn't any metta mentioned in there at all. That is fascinating. So you've got a complete path, but what you have got is a sort of practicing internally and externally, which brings in self and world, which in a way is the sort of the nearest you get to maybe something to relate the territory of relationship, where we practice metta. But also it's kind of like metta has to be is implicit, because the sort of interest and the sensitivity of mindfulness in a way is full, and the sort of being willing to really notice everything without judging it, all of that, in a way that's love. Actually, that's love. So metta's there, but it's implicit rather than explicit. Yeah, I don't know if someone else wants to say something about that.
I think I just wanted to say, like, whether or not foundations is a good translation for the word the Buddha was using, I don't know, but I think I quite like it, because to me, these four foundations feel like, when you build a house, if you don't have solid foundations, actually that house is just going to kind of like fall over sideways at some point, or crumble. And to me, it feels like these four foundations are what the rest of my practice then gets built on. Because if I can't be present to my physical experience, and I can't be present to my own responses of liking and disliking, and I can't be present to my mind and my emotions, and I'm not present to truth and the Buddha's teachings, actually, I probably can't practice metta or love either. So to me, it feels like they're foundational. So it's sort of like, so I can only practice sort of in relation with metta if I'm able to notice, oh, well, what are my actual responses to this person? Otherwise, it's like I'm trying to create something with metta up here, where it's like, oh, may they be well, may they be happy. But actually, it's not grounded. It doesn't have foundations. So, even though I would see myself much more as a metta practitioner than a mindfulness practitioner, it does just feel like these are fundamental. It's like, it's not possible to have a proper, it's not really possible to practice the Dharma without having awareness in place. So I don't know if that helps at all. It's a real thumb, not a yellow one.
That's a really great question, actually, just to kind of really bring it back to basics and really think these things through. I found that really, really good. And I like gateway, actually, as well. That's a good way of thinking of it. I've noticed we have a few more hands being raised. So firstly, we have Lucy and Dorothy who want to ask a question. If you'd just like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, well, it's Lucy. Hi, everyone. Lucy. It's about noticing vedana versus analysing it. So what I've noticed today, and I've noticed this before, is when I'm trying to be more aware of vedana, I'll think, particularly with neutral, I'll think, oh, that's neutral. And then when I go back to it, it's like, it's not actually, it's got a slight pleasant or a slight unpleasant, or even something that could be unpleasant. When I actually investigate it, it's not really unpleasant, it's just an idea of unpleasant. So it's about the balance between how much are we, is that because I'm too much in my head to start with and labeling things that are kind of overlaying something on it? Or is it, how much do we just notice it, or how much do we start analysing it? I get a bit confused about whether I'm going nearer my experience or further away from my experience if I'm analysing it a bit more, if any of that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's a bit like I was saying with when Kusala Devi asked me the box of delights question at the beginning. As soon as we turn towards our experience, it changes. And it's a bit that, that's a scientific thing as well, isn't it? You can't study something without it being affected by us observing it. That's a very, very common experience, especially with the neutral stage of it's getting that fine line, because can anything actually be neutral when we start really, really looking at it? And what happens to painful Vedana when we start looking at it? And what happens to positive or pleasurable Vedana when we start looking at it? It's very interesting. I really encourage you to just keep exploring that, rather than me now saying to you, oh yeah, don't label it, do this, do that. Just explore what it's like to look at Vedana and just go, oh, I've labeled that pleasurable. Is it actually? That's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing I was just going to say with that is how we simplify experience to try and understand it. So obviously we've got these foundations, gateways, we've got this method that we're using to analyze, but actually there's all sorts of things going on and all sorts of layers, and as we look at it, it's changing, partly because we bring awareness to it and partly because it's changing anyway. So it is the sort of model we're using isn't going to give us the complete picture, in a sense. It's going to sort of take us into part of our experience, which isn't going to be everything that's going on.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering if you yourself have a sense of when your analysing is taking you further from being present to the texture of how it feels, and when actually the analysing is you showing it. Do you see what I mean? You're bringing interest to it, and therefore you're getting closer. And I'm just wondering if you've got a sense of which way.
Yeah, I think you can almost come closer, because you do that question: is it actually? And then you look at it and you notice it more. You notice it either in your body or in your mind or your emotions. You notice it more. But then if you go on too long, you start to build a story on top of it, and then you start to go away from it again. So it's about getting the balance for me between saying something immediate that might not actually be accurate and keeping going too long when it's changed anyway. So
but actually that's brilliant, Lucy, because that's you getting your own sense of that, of when the story kicks in and when actually the analysing is helping you get closer. So that's the faculty that you want to carry on developing, which it totally sounds like you are.
Some of the time, a little bit of the time, 1% of the time. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. Actually, that sort of reminds me, when I came along first, it took me quite a while before I understood what Vedana was, because I think I just immediately found myself in the story rather than understanding what really just the raw data, if you like, of one's experience. So it's quite a subtle thing. I think, well, once you get it, it's quite freeing to really be able to explore that territory. Great. So Eileen has a question. Eileen has been patiently waiting. So Eileen, if you want to ask your question now.
Hi there. I just want to say as well that I love this format. It really is working for me. It was a question, it was going back to the box of delights, really. And is it Hridayagita? Yeah. So question to you. I think I watched your talk last week. If it was up last week, I watched something that you did, and you talked about disassociation in there. And that felt like a blessed relief, really, because I've never really heard it in this context. And my experience is that I disassociate a lot. Like when I do Qigong, I can be much more present. But as soon as I sit down to meditate, I feel like I flip out and I can't stay in my body. And that feels like a painful experience. So it's just echoing what you're all talking about, really. But just like when you can't even be in your body, it feels so hard it feels like it's re-wounding in a way. And I know it's not, because it's a really good thing to meditate, but that's what. So my question was just more about the disassociation in meditation, but any references around things to read around this, because I've never, like I say, I've never heard it mentioned in this context, and I was really pleased. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I haven't got any recommended reading apart from the work that Reggie Ray does. So I don't know if you've read any of Reginald Ray's books. Reginald Ray. He does, basically his meditation is all body-based meditation. So, and Dhammagita runs retreats here with that kind of bearing that in mind. So working with, particularly with people who dissociate, but not necessarily, but people that struggle being in their bodies, or people who love being in their bodies, sort of real body-based meditations. And I think, so what I've learned to do is make sure that I'm doing something, even if it's just sort of shifting from weight to weight as we're waiting for everyone to come in the shrine room, to sort of bring myself gently and with metta and with kindness into the room. And then when I sit, if I disappear off, it's okay, just kind of let that happen in a way. But between sits, getting up, moving around again. So it's kind of like, and gradually on a retreat, what will happen is the safety will kick in, and then I'll be more and more present as the week goes on. Either that, or I just dive straight in and I'm straight here, and it's fantastic, which is great. So I think just bringing kindness to the part of you that doesn't want to be in your body, and encouraging it gently back. And then sometimes I have to, so I go for cranial osteopathy sometimes, because sometimes I just can't get back. Something's happened, and it means that no matter how much Qigong or Tai Chi or meditation or anything, I'm still sort of slightly stuck outside. And she just brings me back, and then I stay there for a while, which is great. So I think it's just bringing kindness to the fact that that's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. How do I spell Ray? R-A-Y or W-Y?
Yeah, R-A-Y.
R-A-Y.
He's got, I think, Touching Enlightenment with the Body is a book I've read. I haven't read all of his books, but you've read a few, haven't you? And The Awakening Body's quite a recent one of the last couple of years, which I'm really enjoying, which goes through really clearly his body point training, and like how he likes, it's going to teach me how to meditate in the body even more. Yeah.
So little yellow
book, bright yellow,
which is that's probably quite practical.
And he's got a good website as well, with led meditations on a lot of semi-supine work, so a lot of grounding on the earth as well, not necessarily sitting up.
Lovely, thank you so much. Thank you.
Great. So I think I've got another question which just follows on from Lucy's question earlier. And so Lucy was mentioning about, vedana, and then when is it actually just getting into a story? So I wondered if, Maitridevi, you mentioned earlier about stories and chitta. So I wondered if you could say a bit more about this, like this perspective of when are we getting into a story? My question really is, like, how do we actually gain that perspective? Because it's for myself, I find it very easy to just get stuck in the story. So how do we actually remember to gain perspective on what stories our minds are telling us?
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? One of the qualities of mindfulness is remembering. It's got recollecting, and in a way, if only we could remember. Only we could remember what we were trying to do, it would sort of make a huge difference. So in a way, we're always caught in stories. We're pretty much always in some sort of story. And sometimes the image you get of, sometimes I sit and play in meditation a bit with sort of, like I lose myself, and then I come back and think, oh, I was in a story. And then I kind of see if I can just play the edge a bit of like, well, what is that point where one moment I would say, I'm aware, and what do I even mean by that? And the next moment, I'm kind of not quite there. And it's like I've gone into like a bubble. It's almost like a story bubble. I'm within something, and then I just like do a tiny movement and I've stepped outside, and I can sort of play on that edge a bit. But I do, I suppose, I want to say, there's something about just for me learning to play on the edge of stories, but also noticing what stories allow, because there's different sorts of stories as well. So like I said, we've always got some sort of story. In a way, that's what gives us meaning. So there's some stories close and trap things down and limit us, and some stories open possibilities up. So a story might be like, I can meditate. I mean, it's like, I can't prove that. You know, it's like, I can't get a certificate, or, well, when we could do a meditation course and get a certificate, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't mean anything. In a way, it's a view I can hold. And actually to have a view that actually I can meditate or I can be mindful allows something. It allows possibility. And to have a view which is just as believable, but just as made up, that I can't meditate or I can't be mindful, closes everything down. So there's these sort of, there's both being trapped in a particular story in a moment where you've lost mindfulness, and there's also like the largest stories that we live our life in, which is usually views about what we are and what we aren't, that can have a huge effect on what's possible. I don't know if I've quite answered your question there, but anyway.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, that's really helpful. Just recognizing. I really like that thing of being on the edge, and I can recognize that. You know, 1 minute you're sort of really with an experience, and then the next you've gone, and it's like, oh, where, you know, when did that happen? I can recognize that.
Sometimes you get. I've heard some people use the image of it's almost like getting on the bus. It's like there's a sort of a thought train or a story bus or something like that, and you can just watch it go past, or you can get on it and you're in the inside. There's a definite difference. I find it really hard to spot when I do it though.
Yeah.
You only ever spot it when you get off and you think, I was on the bus.
Yeah, great, thank you. So I guess we don't have any more questions at the moment, but just to sort of open up and say, has the conversation sort of touched anything for any of you that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think I wanted to make a comment about the buses, actually. And it might also slightly relate to, I'm really sorry, I didn't catch the woman's name who asked about the body and dissociation. Anyhow, but it's and it's okay. Oh dear! Now I'm trying to do two questions. The answer's the same, but the questions are different. Okay, let's take it from one at a time. Sorry, folks. I suppose it's because you know how I started by saying I thought I couldn't do mindfulness because basically, like, I'd had it introduced to me as being 100% body-based, and then I couldn't be in my body, therefore I couldn't do mindfulness. And I think I just went on, found retreat after retreat on these satipattanas because I realised they were gateways for me. Because what it meant was that, so it's like, say you sit down and body doesn't seem to be present. It's like you're trying to tune into the breath. And it's like, it's just not there. It's almost like, body, do I have a body? I don't know. But actually there's always some sort of experience that's going on. And what I love about these 4 foundations is that it's like, okay, so what experience do I have going on? Am I on a bus? So I might realise that I'm on the bus of like a particular story that's going on, and then it's like, oh, what's this bus like? What's it like? You know, what's the flavour? What's the texture of the experience of being trapped in this story? Or do you see what I mean? It's like there's always experience. It might not be the experience we want or we want to have accessible to us. But when I look and ask myself, oh, well, what is my experience now? There's always one of the foundations of mindfulness that is present and available. You know, it might be, I don't know what this experience is, but I don't like it. Where don't I like it? Do you see what I mean? There's always a gateway. So, yeah, that's just one of the things that I was thinking about.
Yeah, great. I think that sense of curiosity really sort of fits with what you're saying earlier about the adventure as well, just sort of really approaching your experience with that real curiosity. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something as well. It's around the area we were talking about earlier, working with difficult experience. So we touched mostly on working with difficult experience in the body, but then I was thinking about difficult emotional experience, and how I think for me, when I hear mindfulness as an adventure and about the pleasure of being in the present moment, there is a part of me that says, actually, sometimes it's just really hard. And I know it's a good thing, but it's not necessarily feeling that pleasant. Maybe a bit like Hridayagita was saying, actually going into the experience can be quite difficult. So I think it's a helpful thing to say, or at least I find it helpful in working with this area, that to acknowledge that sometimes it can be really hard. And so I suppose then there's a kind of like, well, why are we actually kind of going in that direction? That's sometimes the question that I would ask. And I think for me, it's probably working with things like very strong anxiety. And sometimes I can't be with my experience completely. So it's sort of acknowledging that, but I can more create the space to get back into my experience, which was a bit what I was talking about in terms of the body. Some sort of way of getting back into my experience, however sort of simple it is, sort of to lead me in. And you know, being with the stories, sometimes if I'm very anxious, the stories are quite hard to be with as well, that sort of noticing. So I think the other aspect for me is, we've already talked about metta, but it's the quality of awareness that we're using. So to make sure that I'm not kind of meeting anxiety with an anxious awareness that's like, oh, what's going on? Am I being mindful? What's happening? Kind of, you know, that actually there's a kindness in that awareness as well that can meet whatever's going on. Yeah, so just that importance of the kindness, and just, I suppose part of that kindness is acknowledging sometimes I might not be able to be as present as I'd really like to be, and that it is kind of tough.
That's all really helpful, and I think part of this, what's really helping me, because I'm sitting here going, oh, this is really hard, but actually it's having a language around stuff. So this is what's really helpful. Yeah, thank you. And it was Eileen, by the way.
Eileen, lovely. Thank you, Eileen.
Yeah, great. So we probably have time for one or two more questions. So just to encourage you, if there are things that have come up for you, please do ask. It's just a really great opportunity to ask the team while they're here. Yeah.
I might take the opportunity just while we're waiting for people. I just have a question. I mean, just around this area, we've talked about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and we haven't quite touched on mindfulness sadhamas very much. And I think for me, that's the one that always seems a little bit abstract. I mean, I'm totally on the journey with, you know, with the body, with vedana, and then chitta, thoughts and emotions. And then we move to dhammas, and it just feels like we shift gear quite a bit, or at least that's how I experience it when it comes to that. And I guess I just wondered if any of you have a particular way when you work with that foundation, what comes to mind? I mean, how do you make that really in your experience, rather than just an abstract kind of thought thinking process?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of is a changing gear, but it's actually just going back to the body, vedana and chitta, but with in a way just going a little bit deeper and saying not just what's the experience like, but what are the sort of deepest qualities, sort of almost universal qualities of all experience. What's the nature of that experience? And you have for me, I don't know, it's doesn't work for Maitrisiddhi, as a sort of classic, the 3 lakshanas. So you can just notice everything changes, or you can notice that everything's ungraspable, or you can notice that because everything's changing and everything's ungraspable, you can't get any sort of ultimate satisfaction from it. So there's a sort of just noticing the existential truths of just exactly the same experience that you've been having all along. So I suppose that's sort of how I, that's one way in for me that works for it. But in a way, it's sort of bringing any sort of positive or opening angle. I've just got this is just what I'm doing today. This might not make any sense to anybody. But anyway, I was driving the car yesterday, and what I was just enjoying was noticing, was being aware of every experience or any experience that arose. And actually, I woke in a grumpy mood and I had a bit of a headache. And actually, I was just enjoying the way my grumpiness was perfectly grumpy. Do you know, it was like, it was doing exactly what it should do. Yeah, it was just doing grumpy. And I didn't need to change it. And I could just be completely mindful of just the perfection of grumpiness or the perfection of a sort of mild headache or something. And just like things simply are as they are. And that's a sort of freedom perspective of actually, I don't need to change it. This is what it's like to be alive. And all I need to do is bring awareness to it. So that's a sort of another sort of, maybe a sort of more this sort of dharmic perspective of just the things are as they are in a certain sort of way. Anyway, I was enjoying that. I was enjoying that yesterday morning. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's quite helpful, having this idea of a dharmic perspective on what's currently going on, rather than as it being something else we have to move into a different phase altogether. Yeah, that's really good. Claire has a question as well. So we're kind of coming to the last 5 minutes. So I'm going to hand over to Claire to ask her question.
Thank you. It's probably kind of a quick one. So it's around body again. And I notice a lot of the time when I get into my body that it kind of goes quite numb, actually. And I think that's why I avoid it. So just any thoughts about how you would respond to numbness in the body when you focus on it?
So that's similar. It's a similar. It may be dissociation. I don't know, but it's similar to what we've been talking about. That when you turn towards it, there's nothing there, and it's not just neutral or anything. It's kind of like how to get into there. So again, just bringing that sense of kindness to as Maitridevi's just said, the perfection of numbness. You know, the perfectness of the fact that when you've turned towards your body at that moment, it's numb. In a way, some of the issues with coming into the body are to do with trust. So it's to whether our body trusts us to listen to it, or whether we trust our body to be giving us the correct information. That's a two-way process. And at some point in our conditioning, there's been a split off, which means that either our body no longer trusts us to listen, or we don't know how to listen because for whatever reason, we don't know how to listen. So really just kindness, self-metta, body metta, and patience with it. That's just how it is, and don't expect it to do anything else. And then at some point you'll get a tingle and you'll be like, wow, my foot's come alive or something, you know, and it'll just be your body starting to see, are you really listening to me?
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
And in addition to what Hridayagita said, I really liked what Hridayagita said. As you're encountering that numbness, you could just sort of notice, oh, so how do I feel emotionally about this? You know, actually, what's the experience like of I'm trying to feel my body and there's nothing there? Because then actually you know, there may well be some sort of response there, which might, you know, it could be anything. Do you see what I mean? It could be like upset or angry or frustrated, but then you do have an experience where it's like, so how does it feel? What is this experience like of trying to be with my body and feeling frustrated that I can't? So this is the beauty of these 4 foundations. It's like there's always something presenting. There's always something to go, oh, well, is experience happening? Oh, yes, it is. But sometimes you have to sort of like change the focus a little bit to notice well, what experience actually is presenting? If the body isn't, well, what is?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the response is fear, but that's interesting, isn't it? And
That's really interesting.
Really noticed that before.
Yeah. So then you've got a fascinating thread. Fear is fascinating. You don't want that to go away. You want to go, that's really interesting. So what is that like, that fear arises? How do I know I'm feeling fear? Is it my mind? Is it, where are the sensations of fear? What's telling me it's fear? Then you've got a really live thread to work with. And this is it. You see, it's like all you want is one live thread. You don't need more than one.
Okay, thank you. That's really good.
Great. Well, thanks. Maybe on that note, we'll draw the questions to a conclusion. And just to say a really big thanks to everyone who asked a question and got this really interesting discussion going. Obviously, we're not quite at the midway point yet, so there's like lots more moving through the different foundations over the next coming days. So as previously, just do check out all the retreat resources on thebuddhacenter.com/awake. There's a wealth of things there: practice suggestions, meditations, talks. So you'll have plenty to get your teeth into. So tomorrow we'll be moving from Vedana, which we were exploring today, to Chitta, so the thoughts and emotions, and that kind of whole idea of stories that we were hearing a little bit about today. So again, just join us tomorrow at the same time, same place online. And I'm going to share the link now to the home retreat space again. Just to mention, from tomorrow again, we have online meditations from thebuddhacenter.com. You can find them if you go to thebuddhacenter.com/meditation. If you're looking to join in different time zones, wherever you are, there's probably one that will suit you. And just finally, just again, if you want to support us, supporting Taraloka and thebuddhacenter.com, you can do that if you haven't already. Again, I've just shared that in the chat box. So thanks again, a big thank you to the team for so wonderfully answering all those questions and being ready to just whatever came up without knowing what was going to happen. Really, really great to hear you sharing your experience. It really just helps getting, having a range of perspectives on the material and hearing what your working grounds are as well. So we'll just have it finished now by doing the usual. You have a chance to unmute yourself and say your thanks and goodbyes, and hopefully see all of you again tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.